Okay, so I see some faces that I'm familiar with, and I see some faces that I'm not so familiar with. So this is going to be a fun group. My name's Kirsten. I am a doctor of physical therapy, and I'm the owner of NeuroRx Physical Therapy, where I work with people that have neurological conditions and folks in the 55 plus category in terms of age. I help them improve their pain, modify their pain, improve function, and solve like complex movement problems, things along those lines. But I'm excited to be here today to talk about all things bones. Okay, getting our bones stronger. So my goal really is to make some of the terms less intimidating, right? And to help us realize that there's something that there are things that we actually have control over, that we can influence the process, and really just help empower us. And I speak for all of us, right? Because this is something that is not really unique to just one population, although we do know that there's a couple different populations that really we're just mindful of or aware of, right? That these are things that we need to be thinking of. So bone mineral density, osteoporosis, osteopenia kind of sound like scary terms, right? Yeah. Okay, but a quick raise of hands first. Who in here has ever been screened? Not, okay, wow, for osteoporosis or osteopenia. Did you use something called a DEXA scan? Okay. Who in here has a diagnosis? All right, okay. Of osteoporosis? Okay, or osteopenia?
You have osteoporosis.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So there is definitely going to be something here for everyone in this room. A quick caveat and disclaimer. Not everything is for everyone, right? So we really need to look to the professionals that have the skills and expertise to help give us guidance about our own individual journeys with some of these things, okay? So there's gonna be a lot of information. Everyone's gonna be able to take something away from it. You don't necessarily have to apply everything to every single person, okay? All right. Goodbye osteoporosis, how to build stronger bones. So the first thing that we're gonna do is talk about osteoporosis and osteopenia. What do they mean? What are the differences? Okay. And then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. It's really just a simple 3-step process. It's a lot of work, but it's a simple 3-step process. Okay. All right. So first thing, bone mineral density. We're really talking about the density of your bones. And you might see in your medical charts this abbreviation BMD, which stands for bone mineral density. Usually what happens is that we have a magic birthday. If you're a female and if you're born female and you're 65, then this sets off a cascade of tests and screenings and whatnot. If you are born male and you turn 70, then this also sets off this cascade of screenings and whatnot. But what happens if we're in a population, let's say a spinal cord injury, right? What we know is that it's really the initial 2 weeks after the injury, like right away, where we see the greatest reduction in bone mineral density. The first 2 weeks, right? So these are conversations and things that we should be talking about ASAP, right away. There should be the conversation and intervention right away with the medical providers really in the hospital. But then what we know is that after about 2 to 5 years post initial injury, the rate of that bone demineralization actually goes down. Okay, so I just want to help us realize that we're kind of talking with two different like special populations, right? So we have more of that 55 plus population that we're talking about, and then we also have the SCI population, or people that are that utilize wheelchair for the majority of their mobility. Okay, so two different populations, and we'll go back and forth talking about both of them because they're both important and they both have a lot of similarities. So a big difference is, one, it's like the magic age thing happens. The other is we have an injury, right? Where we have that significant and fast reduction in bone mineral density. The gold standard for screening, like most of you guys have experienced, is the DEXA scan. So you lay in this thing, right? This thing like scans up and down your body. Pretty harmless, pretty standard, doesn't hurt, right? I hope. I've never had one, but it shouldn't hurt, right? But what they're looking at is, once you get the report, there's some scary numbers on there, scary words like T-score and negative 1.7 to negative 2.5, and right, it's like, what does all of this mean and how does it apply to me, right? And what the T-score is, or what the DEXA scan is doing, is looking at the density of your bones compared to individuals who were born with the same sex as you at birth, that are young and ambulatory. That's what they've decided is the norm that they're going to make the comparison with. And the T-score is just a number that illustrates that comparison. We can talk a lot about what a T-score is. It's statistics and all this kind of stuff that I don't really want to talk about it. What we really need to know is that it's a comparison, right? It's a number that describes a comparison between your bones and somebody else's bones, okay? So normal bone mineral density is a positive number to negative 1.0 of a T-score, okay? This is great because it means that you're less likely to be injured if you have a fall, right? Having a fracture if you have a fall. Your bones will be able to absorb the force of that fall better than, let's say, somebody with a different T-score. Okay. Osteopenia is low bone mineral density. So this is a T-score of -1 to -2.5. This is when we start to notice that there is an increased risk for a fracture to happen if someone were to have a fall, or if you were to slip when you're transferring into your wheelchair or onto the toilet, et cetera, et cetera. So this is when we're noticing that there's an increase in that risk. And then osteoporosis is a T-score of less than -2.5. So highest risk factor for having a fracture if you have a fall, take a tumble, slip, trip, right? Okay. Back to DEXA scans. That's T-scores. DEXA scan, just numbers and stats and all that. It's not my favorite thing. But the DEXA scan, it looks at 3 main areas in your body. So it looks at the bone mineral density in your wrist bones, in your lumbar spine, your low back, and your femurs, or basically this outside hip bone, okay? They compare left and right, and then they compare your scores to that of young ambulatory people of the same sex. It's important to know that you can have different bone mineral densities in different areas of your body, right? So someone might have low bone mineral density in their wrist, but their femur is normal, or vice versa, right? And these, yeah.
Well, each time I've had a DEXA scan, they haven't done the wrist. They've only done the
Interesting.
hips and the, the femur and the low back. And so I'm wondering if that's because of the place I'm going to, or what they told me last time was they extrapolate the data,
Okay.
which is contradicts what you're saying.
Yeah,
which is,
exactly.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
So
I don't think they did my wrist either.
Really?
I'm Kaiser, what are you?
Blue Shield.
Yeah, they were just going up and down like that.
So maybe we asked them.
I never even heard.
They did your wrist? Yeah?
Hmm.
No?
It's possible
No,
that the
it's
scan is
good.
getting your wrist. And it's good.
It should.
Didn't report out on the data though in the report.
Interesting. Okay.
I was listening to something and they were actually talking about how wheelchair users, specialists, when a cord injury is, that's really not a good way to do it, because like they allow you to use their arms.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then
we're gonna talk
there's
about that.
the sitting a lot.
Yeah. Yep. So should we go there now or should we wait? Because we're gonna talk about that. Let's wait. We'll just get to it when we get to it. Any other, my answer is I don't really know. What I know from the research and what I have experienced is that we get information about the wrist. So it might just be the place.
My source isn't about neck.
Interesting. That one I have not heard.
Maybe I'm misremembering because I've
Yeah.
not had one.
That's okay.
My guy didn't say anything about whatever, he just said, yay, I think he said I have osteopenia, not osteoporosis. This is yay, good.
Yeah, that is a yay.
That's all he said, I don't know what they were looking at or what all these other numbers are.
All right. Okay, so here's the next slide. This is just a picture that, yeah, it shows the difference between what a normal bone would look like and what an osteoporotic bone would look like, right? So there's obvious differences, right? So the normal bone just looks more dense, looks more strong. Those circles there are complete, where on the other side, they're not as complete. The weaving of the bone structure isn't as close, right? And it looks kind of scary, but the beautiful thing is that there's actually something that we can do about it. And that's why I'm here today, is to talk about what we can do about it. It's not to leave you afraid or scared. But this is a really big deal, because what we know is that folks that have osteoporosis are more likely to fall and have that fracture. And if on top of that fracture, we pile on other sort of medical conditions and chronic conditions, some weakness, some debility, all of those things, it can be a really tough spot for people to get out of after they've had the fracture. So this is just a general cascade, right, of what might result in that fracture.
Excessive bone.
Bottom.
Oh, right. So excessive bone loading is in comparison to what your bones have the capacity to absorb or tolerate.
So what kind of activity?
Like if you were to fall, but you had osteoporosis, let's say in your wrist. I'm just making this up. You have osteoporosis in your wrist, you reach your arm out and you slip and you trip and you fall. Your bone doesn't have the ability, the structure to absorb the impact, to absorb that load of the fall. So your body weight on top of, right, like gravity and all of that, like bringing you down to the floor, your bones just can't tolerate. So it's in excess, I guess, of what your bones can absorb.
What is high bone training?
Where are we at?
The far left bottom.
Bottom.
Right. So we're going to talk a little bit later on about how these are great questions. We will get to them. Anything else? Any other? Yeah.
A big bone person versus spindly bone person. Like I'm big bone, Scandinavian. Right?
Okay.
And some people are real spindly, they have tiny, so I would think that this would be better, that you're big bone and strong.
Yeah. So
And some people are real,
yeah, I
So-
understand what you're getting at. The idea really is that we want to make sure that our bones, regardless of what they look like on the outside, right? Because this isn't something like I wouldn't look at this individual and say, they've got osteoporosis, right? Like it doesn't work that way. And so it's really about the structure of the bone. So what we're going to talk a lot about today is how do we improve the structure, that solidness of the bone. Okay, so it doesn't matter if your bone is this big or if it's this big, right? If your bone is this big, but it has those little spindly things in there, it's not going to be as strong as a bone that's this big, but it's solid, right? Does that make some sense? Okay. All right. So let's get into some factors that influence your bone mineral density and things that we can start thinking about and considering as we kind of move forward from today. It's important to note that your bones are living, breathing, constantly changing structures in your body. This is good. This means that we can change something, right? And sometimes we might get this idea that we're born with a certain amount of bone density, right? And that bone density has to last us our entire life. When the reality is that it's a constant dance between breaking down old bone and building up new bone, okay? So this is something that's always in flux. It's always changing, okay? This gives us an opening though, right? So calcium, right? We've seen this on the commercials, drink your milk, okay? Super important. The main mineral that our bones need in order to maintain density, maintain their strength, okay? And then the other interesting thing about calcium is that if you don't have, just in general, in baseline, any human, if you don't have enough calcium in your system, right, not just the bones, your system tells the bones to give up some of the calcium that it has. Okay, so super important that we are making sure that we get enough calcium in our diet. Then there's, yeah.
Is there something where the calcium in a certain age or something, they would say like, oh, you don't have to worry about taking calcium supplements when you're over this age?
Interesting. I would think that most people, just based on what we know about osteoporosis and how our bone density reduces as we age, that we would be encouraged to eat or take in more calcium. Yeah. I mean, sure, there's gonna be a level where it's like, well, this is like the max amount of calcium that your system is going to be able to absorb and utilize, right? But in general, we should all be trying to get as much calcium as we can. And then your system will decide if it's too much. Okay. If calcium is important, vitamin D is equally or even more important, because vitamin D is what helps our calcium be absorbed into the system. So the two go hand in hand. If you don't have vitamin D, you can't even absorb the calcium. So again, calcium, vitamin D, they go together. Okay. Estrogen, right? This comes into the aging process, and as females, females will go through menopause, and during menopause, the amount of estrogen in our body decreases. Estrogen actually helps promote the signal that tells our bones to build new bone. Okay, so sometimes estrogen will actually be one of the interventions for people that have osteopenia or osteoporosis. This is something that for me, as a younger person that identifies as, that was born female, is super important, because at one point in time, we were all told that females should watch what they eat, right? And not exercise and not lift weights because we don't want to look like dudes, right? Okay. False, wrong. Do the exercise, eat good food, okay? Because we need to improve and raise the threshold of our bone mineral density before we get to menopause, when we know that one of those signals is automatically going to drop off, and we don't really have a whole lot of control of that process. Okay. And then stress, not like emotional or psychological stress, but physical stress. Wolff's Law is going to be something that we talk about throughout the rest of the presentation today. Wolff's Law basically says that our bones change and adapt based on the amount of stress and pressure that we put on the bones. Okay. So these are the big factors that we have influence or control over when it comes to osteoporosis. Calcium, vitamin D, estrogen, and stress on the bones. But what do we do about it? Well, the first thing is to talk to the doc, right? This is an important conversation that is one that you actually want to have with the doctor, because the sooner that you can identify it and then know that it's happening, you can address it and you can make changes. So the doctors, the medical doctors, they're able to order the DEXA scan, able to order the labs to check your calcium levels, your vitamin D levels, your estrogen levels, okay? And they can also ask questionnaires regarding your risk factor for developing osteoporosis. The other thing that they can do, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions here, but is they can prescribe medication, right? There are medications out there that can help in the reduction of osteoporosis. What's important, a couple things that are important to remember about these medications. A, they do have side effects, right? That can affect other systems in your body. And then B, studies are showing that their effectiveness is only up for like the first 5 years that you're taking the medication. Okay, so after 5 years, it's no longer as effective. So it's kind of one of those things that you really want to talk to your medical provider about it to make sure that you're making the right decision for you at that time.
It's not something you have to keep just raising them at intake kind of thing for it to be effective, it just is not effective at all.
Yeah, they will like gradually increase the dose, and then eventually even the highest dose isn't effective at helping your body rebuild bone, which is unfortunate. Key takeaway, your primary medical provider is going to get the ball rolling with all of this. Okay, it's just something to have on the radar.
And then if you do have osteoporosis, then working closely with an endocrinologist can be helpful. Or,
yep.
Or sometimes a rheumatologist.
Yep. Yeah, it's good to have a lot of people on the team. Okay, so talk to the doctor. All right, food. This is a pretty easy thing that we have some amount of control over. Okay, but we can make changes on a daily basis. Okay, so we talked earlier about calcium. Yes, you can get this in dairy products, but there's also a ton of other non-dairy products where you can get your calcium, right? So almond, soy milk, butternut squash, edamame, kale, sweet potatoes.
Sesame seeds have a lot.
Sesame seeds.
Have a lot.
Okay, nice.
I actually eat a spoonful of
Good. It's a good one. Does anybody else know of any other good sources of calcium? Okay.
Broccoli. Doesn't broccoli have some calcium?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Or D2.
Yeah, I had to save some of them for other. So then vitamin D, we've got our leafy greens, right? So spinach, kale, all that good stuff. Broccoli, legumes, figs, salmon, and tuna.
Artichoke has a lot,
There we go.
like 3 times as much as broccoli.
Okay, good to know.
Boiled collards.
Yeah,
um,
green leafy vegetable, right?
Turnips.
Turnips.
Happy to share a list.
I was gonna say, share that list with us, because that'll give us really good
Yeah, from my
ideas.
doctor.
Yeah, great. Okay, and then vitamin C, right? Right away, we think about our citrus fruits, so oranges, lemons, grapefruit, but then also bananas, peppers, and tomatoes. Yeah, they have some vitamin C. Is anyone taking a calcium or vitamin D supplement? I want to see so many hands raised up in the air. Great. So so supplementation is great, right? But what I would hope that we would all consider doing is focusing on the whole food sources of calcium and vitamin D, right? First.
You get vitamin D from the sun too.
Yep, vitamin
Well,
D.
Just roll.
There you go.
Yeah, but you can't be wearing sunscreen.
Yeah, no sunscreen.
Supposed to get 15 minutes of sunscreen.
And you have to show actually quite a decent amount of skin
Oh, you
too.
need,
So.
I should take more clothes off.
I mean, wasn't gonna say it quite like that, but sunshine is good for a lot of things. So go get sunshine. What was I saying? Oh, supplementation, awesome, but focus on getting your calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin C from whole food sources. I'm the type of person that gets really stressed out when I see like lists of foods And so I was like, okay, so how can I talk about this maybe a little bit differently? And so in my brain, I was like, oh, well, most of these things are plants. So eat a plant-based diet, have some dairy products if your system can tolerate it, and if you like dairy, and eat some fish and beans. And try not to overcomplicate our diet, our nutrition, because sometimes we can get we can go
How come you
overboard
don't
on
have
things.
herring up there for vitamin D? Just salmon.
I'm sorry to offend my Scandinavian friends.
Sardines is a big one.
Yeah.
With bones.
With bones, yeah.
And tofu also.
Yep, I think I have tofu up
Well,
there.
yeah, right
Yeah.
there.
Did anybody bring herring from here tonight?
Yeah.
But does it qualify?
Only if it's pickled.
These are just some ideas,
But
right?
what
It's
about
not
herring?
like
Is
a
herring part of
comprehensive.
that? Should herring be there?
I'm assuming that there's probably
Probably.
calcium in herring.
Vitamin D in herring.
Yeah, vitamin D, yeah. But then also if you eat the bones, you got your calcium. All right. Okay. So to recap, start by talking to the doctor, getting that ball rolling basically, okay? Then focus on eating a plant-based diet, some fish, some dairy, some beans. I guess beans are technically plants. All right, exercise. This is where we talk a lot about Wolff's Law. Do you remember that from a little bit earlier? Okay, so exercise exposes your bones to stress that tells your body to build more bone. Okay, so we talked about how our system is constantly in flux with building new bone and breaking down old bone, building new bone, breaking down old bone. Okay, it's constantly changing. When we stress the system physically, we promote that signal to build new bone. But what's important to know here is that not all exercise is created equal for impacting osteoporosis. That's what we're going to spend the rest of the time really talking about. This is really my wheelhouse as a physical therapist. So ask away in terms of questions.
Well, obviously, like, you know, being somebody who's seated, who can't stand on their own.
Yep.
You know, what can we do without having to need assistance from somebody else?
Good questions. We'll get there.
Yeah.
What we should have done is everyone just, like, we have like a chat and like everyone just throw their question in. And then my presentation is just like answering the questions. But I like going about it this way too, because it might have us think about things maybe a little bit differently.
I thought you were opening up.
Oh, no, that's okay.
That's why I just.
It's totally fine.
Are you okay with taking photos of the slides?
Yeah.
Oh, and I'll send out an email with actually the slide deck,
Oh, cool.
so you'll get that.
Oh, great, thanks.
And also, if the video works out, you'll have the video presentation. We'll get all that.
So, disclaimer, I understand that this is a study that is talking about things that folks that are ambulatory do, right? I get that. But I want us to realize that there are things that we can take away from this and apply to folks that are seated, okay? And we'll go through some of these. I'll show you some of these, and then we'll think about, oh, well, as a seated individual, how might I do something similar? Okay. Important to know, a lunge and walking. This is talking about your peak vertical ground reaction force. So literally the amount of force that your bones experience as you're lunging and as you're walking, at least these first two. So 1.1 times your body weight when you do a lunge. 1.2 times your body weight when you're walking. But we get even more when we do something like running or when we do something like jumping, right? So a jumping takeoff, 3.5 times, just this.
Is that a little hot?
3.5 times my body weight through my bones when I do that, compared to walking.
What's that heel drop?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite ones,
Okay.
because it's super easy to do basically anywhere. You're just gonna come up on your toes, and then you're just gonna drop down. 3.6 times your body weight. And then as we go into some more of these things like a jump squat, where we're squatting down and then going, whew, right? And then a foot stomp where we're doing something along those lines. Okay. So as seated folks, this might not be something that we're doing, right? But what are some things that you think that you could do in order to replicate something where you have a little bit more of that impact and a little bit more of that like force through your body? I have some ideas, but wondering. I'm opening it up to the
Just like
audience.
lifting your leg and
Yeah, you could do that.
then will that go all the way up though to the femur?
Right, yeah. So we'll talk about how to make these things a little bit more specific. But yeah, if you lift your leg up and put it down, you're getting at least 3.5. What is the stomping? Or 4.6 times through your
That's
from the knee
relative to
down.
your body weight, you know. You're not getting your body weight here.
Right.
like
So
you're doing.
right. So the weight of the leg though, the weight of the leg from here down, from the knee down, which is better than 0.
And it's wearing off the shoulder.
Okay. You know, you win some, you lose some.
When you're lifting your legs your whole life, you know, it's hard on your.
Yeah, it
arms
can,
and shoulders.
I can imagine. I can imagine. That's an idea. What could we do with our upper bodies?
Push up and then jump.
Yeah, that's great for especially loading through the lumbar spine.
Well,
Oh, like pushing up
yeah.
Yeah.
Or even that.
like that, just like.
Yep.
do-
Yep, so you'll just push up with both arms and then down. Okay, so the idea is that we can come up with creative ways to make this work for all people, right? What one person might be able to do is not always what another person is able to do. So this is kind of the caveat where working with someone who is skilled in being able to problem solve some of these things and come up with new and different ideas that work for you as an individual, that's super important. Okay, so here's the next thing that might make us think a little bit differently. This is called the Lift More trial. And basically what they did was they took this group of post-menopausal women, which is another one of the groups of categories of people that are very susceptible to developing osteoporosis. And they had them do barbell training, right? So the long steel bars, you've got the black or different colored plates on the end, okay? They had them lift those bars over their head. They had them do a deadlift, so where they're picking that up off the floor. They had them do a back squat, so they put it on their back and squat down. And then what was the other one they had them do? Oh, they had them on like a pull-up bar. They grabbed onto the pull-up bar, jumped up, and then let their body weight like kind of come down, back down onto the floor. Okay. We don't usually think about postmenopausal women doing this sort of thing, right? So as a physical therapist, this is something that has really challenged our profession's sort of biases about what types of exercise we select for different folks. Now, the one thing that we're always concerned about is, well, did somebody get hurt? Did anybody get hurt, right? In this trial, they did it for 8 weeks. They did 2 times a week for 30 minutes. No injuries, like no actual injuries. Like somebody got a muscle spasm. They stepped out of the gym for the day and they came back the next day, they were okay. But this is something that would happen, you know, right, on a pretty regular basis. So non-consequential, basically. So then, okay, well, great, but what actually happened? Did my thing go funny? There we go. So the dark gray are the barbell training individuals. The light gray are individuals that still did exercise, but they didn't participate in the trial, okay, in the high intensity barbell training. What they found was that for the lumbar spine, the bone mineral density in the barbell training women or group, it increased by 3%. But the group that was still exercising, just not doing this specific type of training, their lumbar spine bone mineral density actually went down by 2%. So they were still exercising, they were still doing things, right? It's not like they were just sitting around doing nothing, they just weren't doing this specific type of exercise. The other interesting thing is their leg strength and their arm strength increased significantly, right? In comparison to the folks that did their own exercise program. Okay. And then we look at the femoral neck, or this bone here. And at first I looked at that and I thought, oh, really? 0.5%? It only improved by 0.5%? And then I realized, oh, but look at the other group that did their own exercise program that was lower intensity, not the same. Even though they were still doing some sort of exercise, the bone mineral density of their femoral neck went down by 2%, more than 2%. So there was a negative change for the low intensity exercisers, but there was a positive change, even if it wasn't like a ginormous positive change, right, for the high intensity exercisers.
That was 8 weeks.
8 months.
8 months.
Yep. But 2 times a week, 30 minutes. That's.
Well, I went to a fitness guy when I was younger, and he said, you know, to do those, right? And, you know, I'm using crutches and lifting my body up or whatever. And I didn't see that I should do that because I'm already overusing my arms. And I went back to my work and I told my colleagues that this guy, they should do this all the time. And they agreed with me that I'm, you know, walking with crutches every day and lifting my body all over the place, that it should, you know, that it wouldn't be appropriate. And so whenever they saw me, they would joke and they would go like this. Because they thought it was silly that he would want me, you know, to do the lifting that way, you know, and I agree, because I'm already overusing my arms like crazy with walking with crutches every step since I'm 2 years old, and lifting my body up and all the stuff I do. You know, I just didn't, you know, and they, you know, whatever, you know, my software engineer friends think I should either. And I didn't, you know, because I felt they were already overused.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that, you know, to go and add that to what I'm doing is like, over the
Yeah.
edge.
Yeah,
That's what,
that's
that's
your
how my
experience.
feeling, my experience.
Based on that study,
Sure.
is there merit then, so if I'm doing chair exercises, of putting a weight around my, lower leg or upper leg when I'm doing these things? Would adding weight, like a weight band, give me more weight than I'm?
Of course, right? It would give you more weight. It wouldn't be optimal for you though, is what I would say.
Okay.
Because you're not getting, you're able to stand and get all that body weight through your lower extremities.
Not always, no.
Okay,
Yeah, not
Okay.
always. So I'm trying to look for adaptive exercises too, based on my,
okay,
yeah. I was just curious if that,
yeah,
if I couldn't do the other thing, would that be better than no weight?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So we're gonna start talking about key principles to optimize bone health. Okay, so what are the really important things that we want to think about when we're selecting exercise for ourselves that will help improve our bone health? Okay. Okay. So the first one is specificity, right? We have to select a specific exercise to help with your bones, right? There's certain exercises that you would select to help improve the health of your heart. There's certain exercises that would help to improve the health of your muscles. And a lot of times these things overlap, but specifically for bone health, right? And we know that we need to get impact to the bones. So that's something that we should be thinking about in terms of selecting a specific exercise. We also want to be specific with our body parts, right? So if we know that we have less bone density in, let's say, our left hip, right? We're going to want to think about things that get us to load a little bit more through that left hip that help improve the bone mineral density of the left hip. And same thing. So if it was your right wrist, you would want to think about what could you do to help get a little bit more impact through that right wrist specifically. Remember we talked about the DEXA scans, they take a look at your left and your right. So if you're working with an exercise professional of any sort, let them know, like, hey, my left hip is the hip where I have the lowest bone mineral density, or my lumbar spine is where I have the lowest bone mineral density. And then they'll be able to select exercises that actually work on that specific part of your body. The next thing is that we want the exercise to be progressive, meaning it has to gradually get harder. If it doesn't get harder, eventually that stimulus that you apply to the bones with the exercise won't actually be enough to promote that signal of laying down new bone. So we want it to be progressive, meaning do it harder, faster, heavier, right? Of course, we're thinking about safety as we're doing this, but the other thing to note is that the diagnosis of osteoporosis is reversible. Okay, so exercise and diet together have the ability to actually reverse or change your bone mineral density. Now, it's rare that this happens where a person would go from having osteoporosis to like no longer having any sort of bone mineral density loss. And it takes a lot of work to do it. I'll give you that. But it's possible. Okay. Initial values. This is kind of encouraging. So the folks with lowest bone mineral density to start with are going to be the ones that have the greatest response to appropriate loading, appropriate exercise. Okay. they're going to have the quickest increase in their bone mineral density compared to somebody that would have like normal bone mineral density. Okay. And this is sometimes where I think us rehab professionals kind of have gotten it wrong in the past. We tend to try to treat individuals that have osteoporosis very carefully and like with kid gloves, right? When in reality, we should be pushing these people to do high intensity exercise because we know that they can have the most benefit from this high intensity exercise in the long run. And then on the other end of the spectrum, folks that have normal bone mineral density, or maybe they have osteopenia versus osteoporosis, keep doing what you're doing. But if you stop doing what you're doing, your bone mineral density is going to go down. Okay. Also, you want to keep in mind that very first principle or second principle, which is it has to be progressive. So whatever you do, you have to keep increasing that stimulus that your body gets to lay down new bone. All right, so how do we apply this? So the first thing is progressive resistance training. Oh, so it sounds kind of scary, right? A couple things to note. Progressive, we've talked about this already. It just has to continually get a little bit more challenging. We have to pursue harder and harder. And then resistance. This means that there's some sort of external force, right? So if it's a weight, if it's a band, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Well, actually, I wanted to show. Okay, so this is for it's just, these are just examples, right, of what this might look like. Again, not everything is for everyone, and we can work on adapting and modifying as needed. But these are just exercise examples of all sorts of different people doing different types of things that would fit into this progressive resistance training. I particularly like this video because it's going to demonstrate where in real life you might actually use a skill or a movement like this. Can you guys hear it?
But I don't see the action.
There's no, that's not.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
so the-
Okay,
The audio was coming through, but the video wasn't showing.
good. Thank you for letting me know. Now what do you guys see? Okay, perfect. All right, sorry. I saw a whole bunch of confused looks out there and I thought, what's going on? All right. All right. So why you might do things along those lines, right? There's a method to the madness. Let me look at. Go down my list again here. Sorry, I have links, and so I'll just have to go through the. So this is an individual on Instagram that I follow. But she is doing progressive resistance training using her body weight.
So do you think it's safe for her to like bump down on the ground like that?
Yeah, that's part of that's part of it. We remember we need that bumping. We'll talk a little bit later on in the next couple of videos about why that's important. Remember that trial with the postmenopausal women that were in that barbell training group. One of the things that they did was that jumping up and then jumping down.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I see that and I'm scared, like, oh, that's gonna break my hip, right? If I have osteoporosis.
Right. Right. And so
But
what?
it's
No.
not. Okay.
No. In fact, this is the type of thing that's going to improve your bone mineral density. We have to apply that force to it in order to improve your bone mineral density.
Wouldn't it depend to some degree on what your actual numbers are and how?
Right. Like this isn't something that, I'm going to take the frailest individual to and say, okay, now go plop down on your bottom a bunch of times, right? Like it's progressive, right? So we find where are we safe doing the movement, doing the exercise, and we progressively increase that load or that impact.
Like, would you do that if you were at minus 3.0 or minus 3.5? Would that be okay?
So this is probably not what I would start with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you say what you would start with? Like if this is maybe like kind of like higher load, what would be a lower load?
So it would be something like, right? We kind of talked about this. So this is something that we would
Like
start
doing
with.
that on a mat.
Yep. So something maybe a little less hard. Yeah. Right?
If you have just really skin breaking and having images,
I'm sorry.
skin abrasions or things like that.
Yeah, we're worried about those types of things, right? Yeah.
So, if you get a pad down, something that when
Yep.
could-
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the idea with something like this is not to say, day one, come on, get down there, right? This is for us to start thinking maybe a little outside of the box, maybe a little outside of our comfort zone, maybe a little bit beyond what we think we or someone else, right, should be able to do. Okay. So I intentionally put some of these types of videos in to get us to go, right? And to ask these types of questions. Okay, so the next one. This is a younger individual, but she's doing that overhead press that we were talking about with the barbell that the group in the Lift More trial did.
And where's that gonna
Yep, so all of the bones through the arms, all of the bones through the spine, right?
So the left leg would have the lumbar?
Lumbar for sure. Yep. And you'll actually get some of that pressure down through your hips as well as you do that.
Could you use like elastic bands to do that?
Right. Yeah. Yep. Again, this is progressive, right? This is one end of the spectrum. I'm showing you the end of the spectrum that's like, right?
Right.
Okay.
We're not gonna go out.
Nope.
Whatever.
Nope.
We're not gonna go to 250, maybe more hang.
But I think what this individual would say is that she finds this important because it helps keep things strong so that her arms are strong for her in order to be able to do the transfers, to get in and out of the chair, get on and off the floor, all of that kind of thing. If she wasn't doing, or if they weren't doing this type of training, they might not have that same type of strength that they need. Okay. And then this is just a fun little, I call it a medley of like different ideas of things. So more body weight. Again, using maybe just a PVC pipe to bring it up overhead. This guy has some dumbbells that he's using. Just some body weight exercises. Okay. All right. The next thing, high velocity power training. This means moving things, implements other than your body. Well, you can do your body as well, but quickly, fast, with power, with speed, with agility. Okay. So here's what this might look like. We've got this individual here picking up a weight from the floor and bringing it directly up overhead. He's moving that quickly.
Awesome, Mark.
Okay. Keeps going back to her. Here's another one where this individual is using a barbell and going from the floor to overhead with it. Again, and it's bouncing on the lap too. They have these like really nice little pads that are made specifically for this.
Is that, I think it's good product?
Yep. Yep. So these are ideas.
Yeah.
I think it's
Again, these are things to make us start thinking a little bit differently about how exercise might look, okay?
It's getting the juices flowing.
Right.
getting Ideas flowing.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so this is probably a little bit harder than what that individual before was doing. But lifting that weight from your hip area to your shoulders quickly, right?
What does that do to your elbows?
I know,
It makes sure that they're very bendy and flexible.
So even like, I mean, probably just starting off, you're just gonna do it like this, right? Without
Yeah, absolutely, right?
And then start, like you said.
Yep, then we're gonna progressively add some weight. One thing that I like to do with individuals is use implements that don't look quote unquote scary like this, right? So use a medicine ball and you just hold it here and then you bring it here quickly. Here, 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 here. Yep, okay. I see people starting to think a little
Well,
bit.
and we have the fitness center downstairs that has a lot of equipment. So
Yeah. Yeah, we actually, there's gonna be an opportunity for us to practice some of these things too, so.
So I thought this ended at 6, so
Oh,
I
yeah.
unfortunately have to leave.
Yeah, go for it.
Well,
Thank you for
we have it
attending.
recorded, so we'll send you the recording.
All right, so here are some other ideas for weight-bearing impact training. Sorry, it's gone a little longer than I expected. So weight-bearing impact training is basically putting weight through your limbs and actually adding a little bit of that force that we were talking about. Remember the individual that was using the rings and she was kind of letting her bottom bounce on the ground? That's the impact that we're talking about. This is an idea. So any sort of crawling that you might be able to do. Now, maybe it's not on the floor, maybe it's wall, maybe it's at a table or at some sort of like an inclined surface.
This is even this crawling board from seated
Yep,
on a table.
yep. Okay. This lady is doing some jumping, actually. Well, she's gonna do some weight stuff first. Right. Okay. All right, and then last slide here. This is an individual
Pictures.
that has CP. And they are jumping rope with one arm. You can see she gets frustrated at first, right? It's like, ah. And then she decides to come back to it and try it again. And then
Oh, wow.
she gets going, right?
Wow.
But what's cool about this, okay, so from like the osteoporosis, bone mineral density side is that, yeah, she's getting a ton of external weight and that force through her entire skeleton. Awesome, right? But I like that she got frustrated at first, threw it down, walked away from it for a second, because this is life, right? But then she comes back to it and she finds that she is successful at it, or, you know, works toward, doesn't give up, right? So I think about this often when I'm getting frustrated with things. I get frustrated when I jump rope too, so. And then here's this individual again. So she has this really handy hook that she uses on the bar for doing things along this line for the limb that doesn't have as much function as the other. Again, this is not saying these are the exact things that you should be doing every day.
Right.
This is getting us to think outside of our box a little bit about what we might incorporate into our own exercise routine. How might we incorporate a little bit more impact? How might we incorporate some weight into our own routine? How might we incorporate a little bit more speed and quickness in what we do? Okay. All right. And then if you guys would like, okay, so this is again a recap of those things. We have an opportunity where we could practice some of these things or some variations.
I would love to, but I need to take off.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Go
much.
for it.
Thank
Yep.
you.
And we'll make sure that you get the slide deck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank
Yep,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah, me too. I do have a question, because I think
Yeah.
that people might want to know this too, because things that we're told about, like the standing frame.
Yep.
You know, like, and how that's supposed to be kind of like the gold standard for wheelchair users.
Yep.
Especially that's what I was told, like that. The kind of front line of you know, doing something, but I'm just wondering, like, how would being doing the standing frame compare to, say, something like those like overhead presses that are like bending down?
Yeah. So I was actually reading this study last night or the night before, because I was like, oh, I'm sure they're going to ask some questions about this. And the study looked at basically all the studies that they've done with spinal cord injury and different intervention for osteoporosis. And what they found was that there was low effectiveness for things like electrical stimulation, a tilt table, standing frame, and there was one other thing. It was the E-stem and you're like hooked up to a bike.
Yeah, I have that, the FES one.
The FES bike,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's not to say that these things are things that you should just completely throw out of your routine, out of what you do, but just know that they're not as effective as incorporating progressive resistance training, high intensity or high velocity power training, and that weight bearing impact training.
That's
Okay.
really good to know.
Yeah,
Can you share that article?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
great.
The same article also looked at pharmacologicals, and there was one other thing that they looked at, but and the other sad thing was that they found that there's basically not enough data out there. There's not enough studies to make really, really, really good, hard claims about, you know, what we should be doing. But that the go-to things aren't as effective as what they could be. Which is part of the reason why I wanted to do this,
Yeah.
right? Is to show that maybe we need to think a little bit differently about how we're dealing with osteoporosis and bone mineral density in the seated population, but then also in the 55 plus population. So.
Yeah. that makes sense. I should know get your vitamin D. My mom likes, she will do this. She came to it later in life, yeah.
That's awesome.
Doing her bread, doing her jumps. Anyway, but no, it's like, I love seeing, you know, the different populations doing different exercise.
Right. And the populations where we typically are like, they don't do exercise, right?
Right.
Like we shouldn't really be thinking about it that way. Yeah. So,
Because I have a standing here too. And
Yeah.
I was, doing it 'cause- and then talking about the standing wheelchair.
uh-huh.
And, yeah, like say, mentioned the,
Yeah.
Well.
Yep.
That would be good.
So it's not that you shouldn't use a standing frame or a standing wheelchair or these things. There's so many benefits to using it, right? It's just that in particular for influencing bone mineral density, those things aren't as effective.
Yeah, 'cause
Right.
it's bowel, bladder, and circulation.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and like pressure management,
Yeah,
all of these things. So I'm not saying don't use them. Don't hear me say that.
Yeah.
Don't hear me say don't use E-stem, don't use FES. I'm just saying in particular for osteoporosis, right? We might need to be thinking about doing different things.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Great questions, guys. Really good questions. Anything else?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you.
Yeah.
My doctor suggested. Injection supposed to. Last year, we could have only 6 months and then. last year,
Okay.
But I was a little leery about, going through.
Yeah.
I'm in
Yeah.
the same boat. It's recommended that I do the one that builds up bone. It's called the Benedy and it's once a year. And I'm researching it. I mean, people who write about side effects, I think, have more. You know, so it's like, but I talked to someone last night who's at the end of her year. She doesn't have really, but she has osteoporosis.
Okay.
And she said, you know, she had some issues in the beginning, like, you know, she could tell she had to have it for her arm. But then it's been working. She hasn't had the follow-up.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm sort of in an emergency.
Yeah.
If I could figure out funding.
Sure. can't really, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a doctor of physical therapy, right? So I can't really speak to the specifics about different medications, how they work, how, you know, those types of things.
When she was referring was for some extra people, she said.
Yeah.
And get, or basically, you can only do that for so long, and you have to switch you over, say, the last or so long.
Yeah.
So in that, we were just being much stronger.
Mhm.
Than he has.
One thing that just occurred to me is that, you know, if you're in a situation where your bone mineral density is very, 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 very low, right? Like the -4, you might consider an injection along this, not necessarily medical advice, just musings in my brain.
Yeah.
You might consider doing an injection, something along those lines to start, to help send that signal to build the bone. And then to start implementing some of these exercise strategies, diet strategies that we talked about today. Like you're already on step 1, right? And you're probably looking at step 2 and step 3 as well, but just maybe looking at it slightly differently.
Sorry, didn't mean to, we didn't get to the exercise.
Oh, that's okay.
But,
Yeah.
I think those were really good examples.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, and you guys will have links to them. Again, don't, you know, put a bunch of weight on a bar and try to throw it up over your head tomorrow if you haven't done that before.
Yeah. Well, you know, Jorge teaches a class on Fridays down in the fitness center.
Oh, nice.
So I'm sure you got some good ideas.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
definitely like marble presses, we have the PVC.
But yeah, we should
Yeah.
get those from I'll get them from you. But I've been wanting to bring them up anyway, so.
With the one quick thing about PVC, you can, if you guys have those exercise bands, you can actually put them to add resistance. You put them like around the PVC and then around the wheelchair wheels, and then you get that, or the wheelchair frame.
We have some
of
with
some-
sand in them too.
That's great too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we did that with Brent, right?
Brent did that,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's that? Oh, put sand in the PVC pipes so that they're heavier. Yeah.
I'll go over it.
Yeah, well, those, the mats